Hey guys, Martin Mentor here, back with another video. All right, so this video is going to be a little bit different today. I know we talk a lot about middle mile, we talk about final mile, but I do want to talk about moving, since I do have a moving company, and moving is a business that uses box trucks. I think I'm going to start throwing moving into some of my compare and contrast videos. So what I want to do in this video, because there's a lot of people that do inquire about the moving business, and they are curious about how it works and that the earning potential and the margins in the business. So what we're going to do in this video, I'm going to compare a moving business in contrast to a middle mile trucking freight business, in contrast to a final mile trucking business. And since I've done all three, I own a moving company, and we specialize in final mile on my trucking business. I'm going to give you a compare and a contrast of the earning potential and the margins in all three. And then, for the person who's doing research, they just can't figure out, maybe this video will bring some type of value to them and help them in their decision on which route they want to take. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my rates on the screen of what I charge, and then I'll talk about that, and then I'll give you the margins, and I'll tell you what I pay to my employees. All right, so for two movers, I charge $100 an hour with a 2-hour minimum. For three movers, I charge $150 an hour with a 2-hour minimum. All right. If the job is in the city of Chicago, there's a $100 truck fee that is associated with that, which covers the cost of the fuel and the materials. All right. If it's a 2-man job, normally it's a studio, a few items, or a 1-bedroom. So it's not something that's major. That's how we bundle it up for marketing purposes, so that the customers don't think we're trying to get over on them, because a lot of moving companies, the way it works is you're paying for the materials on top of the labor, on top of the fuel, and on top of everything else, and usually there's a 20% markup on that material. I just bundle it up for marketing purposes, so the customer doesn't have to figure out and do too much adding. They just add up the labor per hour, 2-hour minimum, plus the cost if it goes over 2 hours, prorated in 15-minute increments, plus the cost of the truck fee. All right. So now $100 an hour for 2 guys, 2-hour minimum, $150 an hour for 3 guys, 2-hour minimum. If it's a house, then obviously it's more guys, the rate will be higher. Third floor walk-ups and above, I start charging at $200 an hour, and that can go up depending on if it's a first to a third, a second to a third to a second, a third to a third. Obviously, the harder the scope of the job, the more money it'll be, but it starts at $200. So $200, and then let's say if it's a third to a third, you may be looking at $225. You got 4th floor walk-ups here. If it's a third to a fourth or a fourth to a third, you may be looking about $250 to $300 an hour. So it all depends. All right, now what I pay, my guys make on average anywhere from $25 to $60 an hour. All right, so on a typical move, the higher rates are incentivized when you're doing like those third to fourth, second to thirds. That's when they get those incentives and those higher pay scales. When they're doing those more labor intensive stair moves, that's when you see the $50 and $60 an hour rates. But for the most part, these guys are making about $25, $30 an hour. So let's say on a 2-man crew, right? They go out, they do a 1-bedroom, 2-man, $25 an hour per man. It's about $50 an hour. I charge $100 an hour. That means the company is making $50 an hour, plus we're making the truck fee cost. All right. So on a typical 4-hour move, the company would make $200 an hour, $200 off the labor, plus $100 or so on whatever the truck cost would be. All right. Those margins are good. Those are very good margins compared to final mile and middle mile. Why? Because the truck goes to 2 places, and it's sitting there for however long it takes to load, however long it takes to unload. Most people that move here, especially with apartments, they're only moving within a 5 mile radius. we also do a lot of same building moves. Apartment to apartment. Person may move from the 7th floor of a high rise, and then a apartment comes available on a higher floor so they can get a better view of the city. You might just moving from the 7th floor to the 40th floor. So in those cases, you're not burning that much. You're not burning that much fuel at all because you're only going to one stop, but we still charge them a travel fee. So we don't get rid of the fee. We just change the terminology of it. So see, in the moving business, the customer pays for everything. Everything that you charge for, your cost, whatever your costs are, you pass that along to the customer. The cost of labor, you pass that along to the customer. Plus you double it. So 2 guys is costing me $50 an hour. I charge $100 an hour. I'm making $25 an hour off each guy. The company is making $25 an hour off each guy. We're making $75 an hour off 3 guys. $150 an hour we charge. We're making $75 there. And as it goes, the more guys, obviously the more money, right? Plus we charge for the fuel. We charge for the use of the truck. And we bundle it up in what we call a truck fee. All right. So, unlike, middle mile and final mile, there's a barrier in between what's called a logistics company or a broker. All right. So let's talk about middle mile since we're going into the logistics broker and logistics company rather and broker. All right. So just to recap, we're doing about 100% markup on the moving business. So markup is 100%, and it gives me a margin of somewhere between 50 to 60%. All right. 100% markup on the labor, right? We're passing the cost of the materials along to the customer. The truck is paid for. All my trucks are paid for. All right. So the truck that the customer is receiving is paid for, but we still charge them for the use of the truck. All right. So margins are very good. Earning potential is very good with moving. Let's get into this middle mile and this final mile, since I mentioned logistics companies and brokers. Let's start with middle mile. You're dealing with brokers. You're dealing with dispatchers. Your cost to run middle mile is a lot greater. All right. Most middle mile drivers are OTR. They're over the road. You're running off the load board. You're running off Amazon Relay load board. You're doing some miles. Some people are doing more miles than others, but the fact of the matter is you're running up some miles, and if you're running up some miles, you're running up some fuel costs, all right? So your expenses are a lot more. It's not as labor intensive as running middle mile, but your expenses are higher. So there's a give and take. There's give and take. All right, so the earning potential for moving and final mile is a lot greater than middle mile. Final mile, similar to the labor intensive work of moving, maybe not as labor intensive as moving, but because of the labor aspect of it, the rates are higher than middle mile. All right. If you are an individual who is content with just you and your one truck and you're fine with that, you have you just don't want to, you have no desire is what I'm looking for. You have no desire to scale at any point, and you're just content with just you and your truck, and it provides a good living. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are a person who's older, maybe a woman, maybe you're younger, you're just not physically capable to handle moving in final mile, then middle mile, there's nothing wrong with that. You just know what your earning potential is. You can see 6 figures. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to do some OTR. You know what I'm saying? It's just going to be a lot of driving. All right. Now, and then your margin obviously is going to be a lot less. It's going to be a lot smaller. All right. Because, middle mile margins are very small because you consume with so much overhead costs. All right. You can reduce that cost, but still that margin was a lot smaller than moving and even final mile. And one of the main costs in middle mile is, like I talk about it all the time, is your truck costs. If you're in a rental, eventually you're gonna have to transition out of that rental so that you can increase your margin, see more of your money. All right, final mile, bigger margin, a little bit slightly bigger margin, but what may be that's a pro, but then I guess some would look at the con as the labor, a lot more labor. You're dealing with furniture, you're dealing with appliances, you're dealing with multiple stops, you're going in people's homes. It's more liability, it's more liability at stake here. Like moving, you're dealing with appliances, you're touching them multiple times, you're touching the appliances multiple times, and you're also entering into multiple people's homes, which increases your risk of liability a lot greater. A person running middle mile, the only chance they got to probably break something is when they're in transit, if they don't tie the load down properly and the pallet tips over or whatnot. So, with final mile and moving, there's a higher risk of claims, higher risk of liability, claims, damage to property. Also, there's a higher risk of injury. All right. Those are just two things to look out for. But because of all the labor that's involved around final mile and moving, you're talking about the earning potential is a lot greater for middle mile compared to final mile. You're looking at about $100,000 to $150,000 gross difference a year per truck between middle mile and final mile. One moving truck a year, depending on how hard you're working, a moving truck, my one studio to 2-bedroom moving trucks can do 2 to 3 moves a day. All right, and it can average at about anywhere, depending on the job scopes, somewhere between 1,800 to maybe 2,500 in a day on a good day. You know what I'm saying? So you got some moves, a good 3-man third floor move that takes maybe about 4 hours. You're looking at about $1,000 right there. And if they do 2 of those in one day, you're looking at about $2,000. That's 8 hours. All right. So 8 hours, $2,000 gross. I mean, you're not grossing $2,000 on the final mile truck in 8 to 10 hours, with 20 to 25 stops. All right. You're not grossing $2,000 on a middle mile truck in 8 hours. You can do it with moving, but you're going to work. You're going to work. Your guys are going to be working. So, the earning potential with a box truck, sky's the limit. It all depends on, what you want to do. I don't know if I touched on final mile. Final mile average truck, $1,000. That's on the average side. Some markets, depending on what they're running, what company they're running, may pay a little less, somewhere between $500 to $1,000. Some routes pay more. It all depends on how many stops you can get done and what the volume looks like in your market. Here, in this market, we can get up to 25 stops if you can get them complete. You got a crew that can get them complete. So you can make $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a day here. And that's pretty much where you're going to max out at. And that's if you can get about 25 stops done. But the average is about $1,000 a day. And then my cost running final mile, because I pay very handsomely. I pay my crews very handsomely. My margin on final mile is somewhere between 20 to 30%. It kind of fluctuates depending on what the volume is. But on an average $1,000 route, make about really 25 to about 35%, but it fluctuates. So I'm going to tell you guys 20 to 30% on the low end. And that's still good because, I'm looking at 6-7 day a week contracts. A lot of people mess up where they try to take 50%. So if they're making $1,000, they want to take 5 because just the math just looks too good and it just sounds too easy. But if you're taking 5 and you're accounting for your fuel, if you don't have a truck that's paid for, you're paying truck costs, then what are you paying your crew to do this labor intensive work? All right. My whole objective is to take care of the crew, to give them motivation, to give them incentives to get up the next day and come back and work for old Marky Mark. All right. So that I can get paid residually over time, Monday through Saturday. I don't want them to be looking on Indeed or people in their ear, man, come work for me. And man, what he pay? I could pay you more. And then when they tell him what Marky Mark paying them, damn, he paying you that. So just get it out the way, pay him good so you don't have to worry about all that stuff. And then like on the moving side, I pay exceptionally well, obviously, because those rates are passed along to the consumer. All right. So middle mile is probably the easiest as far as labor intensive, but it pays the less. The other two are more labor intensive, more liability driven, but they pay more. So it's all on what you want to do. You know what I'm saying? And another thing is, you have to know your market. What's going to work in your market? You may be in a small town and moving may just not work for you, but that all comes with research. You have to know that prior to getting in. You're in a big city, Chicago, New York, Houston, even Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? Atlanta's not big as those the Chicago, New York, LA, and Houston. Those are the top 4 largest cities in the country, but Atlanta, there is still a nice size population, and people move. May not be as many moves as the first 3 cities, but there's moves. So if you're living in the middle of a rural area, then moving may not be for you. All right. Middle mile may be for you because you can get on your truck and go anywhere. You can drive up to the Midwest and work up here because this is where all the freight is, right? Everybody knows that if you're in the Southeast, it may not be conducive to run middle mile, and you're looking for freight out there because everybody knows the Southeast doesn't carry that much freight, especially like if you're in Florida. You can get in your truck and you can go to a market that has the freight. Same thing with final mile. If you're in a small town, there may not be many people. The volume may not be high for final mile there. So you got to know your market. Now, if you're in the Midwest, like here in Chicago, I can close my eyes and spin, and wherever I land, open my eyes and point is opportunity. The volume is high for final mile, right? Moving, well, this year was bad. And I'm gonna talk about that in probably some later video. This year was bad, but still, people moved. There's people living on top of each other here. All right. And then middle mile is good because we're in the Midwest, so it's industrial here. All right, there's plenty of freight. So in this market, you can make it in any lane. So you got to know your market and know what's best for your market. But if you're running middle mile, you can just literally get in your truck and go to a market that's checking that bread. Same thing for Amazon. Amazon is good in some markets, and some markets is not so good. So you got to do your research before you jump fully into the game to know what works in your market. And if you're in a market where you're just in a dead zone, that, man, you know what, I got to do middle mile. I got to get and probably head up to Chicago. I got to head over to Indianapolis. I got to head up to Detroit. I got to head to one of these industrial areas in one of these Midwestern states where the freight is at, so I can make some money on the road, on the load board. All right. So there's my comparison and contrast between the moving business, the middle mile business, and the final mile business. I didn't go that deep in depth. I just gave you guys a broad general analysis of the three, so that you can have some type of understanding, some type of idea of what you're up against if you're looking at this video as research to get into the game, or if you're in the game and let's say the lane that you're in may not be working for you. There's two other options that you can utilize your box truck for. All right, www.boxtruckcourses.com for your one-on-one mentorship with me, Mark the Mentor. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the upcoming videos every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time here on YouTube and on Facebook, The Mentors Podcast with me, Mark the Mentor. I'm out.
Go mode, showboat, rowboat, wave ride. Cool shorty, too naughty, pool party, wet for the face ride. Annie up, penny down, hand me down, thrift store, old drip. New money, too funny, old shorty, talk about, oh shit.